Peter, the password's up there and that. Just look that.
I'll just check the brief, it's not right.
Good, okay. No, Bruce. No, yeah, sorry. Yep.
Dyslexic?
It's a question mark rather than a one. Yep. Yep.
Now live, everyone. So welcome everybody. For those who don't know me, my name is Paul Davis, and I'm a Western Councillor and chairperson of the meeting. Council needed a subcommittee to ensure the smooth running between the governance and management of the Wilderness Trail. So I'd just like to go around the table and just, if everyone could just introduce themselves. First meeting.
Simon Bastian, Chief Executive of the Western District Council.
Nicole Klinsman, Ops Manager for Subcommittee.
Brownlee, Generation Site Leader for Trustpower on the West Coast.
Dave Inwood, Independent Consultant. Peter Haddock, Grey District Councillor.
Jackie Gooden, Wilderness Trail Manager for the Wilderness Trail Trust.
Bruce Smith, Western District Council.
Dwayne Maitland, EA and Committee Secretary.
And also the people that are on Zoom.
Jeff Gabbity's Chair of the Wilderness Trail Trust and Trail Operator.
Paul Morris, the Chief Executive of Grey District Council.
Thank you, everyone. We have a couple of apologies. Mr. Madrick and Mr. Tumahai. Are there any other apologies? No. I'd like to move that Mr. Madrick and Tumahai receive and accept it. Could someone move that, please?
Second that.
I'll have it up. Move it all second.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 4, which is the adopt terms of reference.
So I'll pick that up. So good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, wilderness stakeholders. I've developed the terms of reference since we've developed this subcommittee of the Capital Projects and Tenders Committee. To me, the missing link in terms of the Wilderness Trail has been a group that looks after the governance of the trail and directs the future of the trail. We found it very important that this group represents the key stakeholders of the trail, hence the partnerships that we see around the table today. Just highlighting the key responsibilities of the subcommittee, and I'll run through the reason quickly. Defining the overall strategy plan for the West Coast Wilderness Trail, ownership and development and maintenance of the West Coast Wilderness Trail asset management plan, defining the priority projects for the trail, reviewing and defining financial sustainability of each proposal, ensuring the prioritisation of projects reflects the community and user needs, supports the New Zealand Cycle Trail Network Program and strategy and meets the criteria set by the major Great Rides New Zealand, and closely working with all key stakeholders of the Wilderness Trail and support funding applications as applicable. So those are the key drivers of why this subcommittee has been formed. I won't go through the whole terms of reference, but I'll take it open for questions.
Are there any questions from anyone?
Through the chair, I've probably got 3 or 4, and I don't know if you want to just bring them up one at a time, but the first one was just a question of mixing management and governance.
Report to council. It's actually an independent body on behalf of the Wilderness Trail Trust. So the trail manager is employed by the trust and reports as part to this group as part of the trust report on trial performance. So in terms of operations, we've invited them along as part of the trust, not as part of the agenda, not the makeup of the subcommittee. So the chair is the subcommittee representative.
Okay. The second point was just of interest to note that the chair can require the Westland District CEO and staff to leave the room, but not the trail manager. So that was just another point of sort of bringing up in there. And I just wonder if we could confirm the maximum term for the chair before being read.
Yeah, I'll open it up to discussion, whether they see point 2 and 3. Happy for the trail manager to be considered operational, if that's considered appropriate in terms of governance. Jeff, what's your opinion on that? You're on mute, Jeff. Jeff, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. Back through via the chair, I suppose. Look, I have no issues with Jackie in particular being part and parcel of a meeting in this role. I guess I understand broadly the issues of who you can ask to leave and not leave at various times, but I would confess to being a babe in arms with this, and I'd be guided by yourselves.
Thank you. Yep. Just one other point, if I could, through the chair, just was the organisational chart on page 7 just doesn't reflect the Grey District Council involved in the operations. And although the Grey District Council only has 19 kilometres out of the 132, it's still a important part of the trail. So that was just something that perhaps you could either answer or.
I suppose when we parties and the structure sits under like that, so we can actually separate that if that's what the committee wishes.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Picking up on what Peter's raised there, is there potential for conflict in relation to the trust and this committee, because that would guide me on whether there's an issue there. Is there any potential conflict? Are we going to be sitting around here talking about things that the trust is involved in that we would prefer to keep within the committee?
I'll ask Jeff to answer that question. Do you believe, Jeff, that there's any conflict in terms of discussion points that would, I suppose, conflict your decision making at the trust level?
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Your Worship. I think that the role of the trust is increasingly the day-to-day marketing and promotion of the trail, and the day-to-day interaction between the trail owners, being the two councils and the stakeholder bodies, and the operators, particularly in times of strife and need such as weather bombs. So again, I find it difficult to see too much of a conflict of interest in that area. But again, I will be guided by yourselves in that respect.
I guess through the chair, just if I can make a comment with that, to me, when that's raised, I think, what's the purpose of this group? And is this group not actually to look at what's happening on the trail and input everything? And it's like the trust is this pivotal role within all that links everything together and knows what's happening out on the trail. So I guess if you ask that question, you've got to go, how involved does this governance group want to be? How much does it actually want to look at what's actually happening on the trail? I mean, to me, I would have thought I can't see a conflict of interest. And I think we're really pivotal on what's happening out there. So it depends, to me, it comes back down to what's the fundamental purpose of the group.
Through you, Mr. Chair, will the trust be asking this group, Peter, where you're coming from, wherever that is?
Well, it was just mixing governance through the chair, just mixing in the management and governance, and all due respects to the trial manager, of course, and there's no, but that's just, this is a governance group, compared to comparing against the trial management,
If I could comment through the chair, please. It's interesting to note that this group has come together, and I see it as being a very complex and full collection of stakeholders, and I can only compare that with the situation we have on the Alps to Ocean, where again there are definitely two councils involved as well there, and we on the Alps to Ocean don't have the structure that you have around this table now. And one of the things that we are continually struggling with is making the sorts of decisions at a high enough level that actually engage with both the councillors, with both councils and the other associated organisations that sit with it. So the comment that Jackie's making about the sorts of issues that we're dealing with and the need, I think there's just a desperate need to be able to be sitting around the big table with the players that have got the money on the table as well. So to exclude us would lose a lot. You'll end up dealing with the assets as if they were a separate bunch over here, and in the meantime the activities actually happening on the trail, and we don't get a chance to see those coming together. That's all I have on that one. Thank you, Simon.
Makes sense.
To me, it's about all parts of take the trail as a piece of business. If you exclude the marketing and salability of the trail in terms of your discussion points around prioritising projects, you're actually excluding why you're actually building the trail. So we can build a trail and maintain it. Where do they have the business case, and is it marketable, and is there a likely need for it out there? All that intel is currently coming from the trust in terms of the research they do, the surveys they're supplying, and the feedback they're getting from their customers. So that I suppose is part of the impetus in terms of priorities. In terms of reference, but I would like to obviously acknowledge the questions raised by Councillor to include modifications of the diagram to include Greymouth operational site maintenance. I will also suggest that when it comes to the tier that we include the trail manager in that as well. And the third point was
it's just the reappointment of the chair term, wasn't it?
Okay, we'll put a time frame. If this committee's okay, we could term it as part of the triennial review. If it's comfortable, is anyone agreeing?
That'd be fine for me. Thank you.
Okay. So, could someone move that the term of reference for the West Coast Wilderness Subcommittee be adopted?
Can I just raise a point of order or clarification? Before the terms of reference are adopted, then the members sitting around the table are not members. So am I correct in thinking that it's probably only you and I who can move in second? Am I correct then? Is that correct? And then after that, everyone is formally appointed. But on that basis, I'm happy to move it.
And I'll second that.
With the amendment raised by Peter.
Thank you.
So, all those in favour?
Aye.
Second.
Carried. The next item 5, is the West Coast Wilderness Trust Board update. So that's the trust chair.
Thank you, one and all. We would just like to we'd like to do a joint presentation or verbal presentation between Jackie and myself. And what we thought we would do is summarise the key roles and the key issues that the trust is dealing with, that Jackie will take us through. I would just like to make some brief comments about the Wilderness Trails standing within the cycle network, and then highlight what I would see as being the 4 significant issues or the risks that we currently feel we have with the trail. And then Jackie is going to finish off with a breakdown of where we see the trail extensions and impacts on numbers. So Jackie, if I could just perhaps, with your consent, Mr. Chair, if I could perhaps ask Jackie to start off with that.
So making an assumption that there is a reasonable amount of knowledge in what the trust actually does, was really jumping in and just summarise detail. Trust is key, as you'll all know, with all the emergency communications and situations when we have weather events and other events out on the trail. We also are that link between New Zealand Cycle Trails and EMB with all things like the warrant of fitness, the market research work that happens, and all the reporting requirements. And I just wanted to touch on that and just let you all know that every month we get feedback from people into the New Zealand Cycle Trails survey that is done, and we get documentation or the results of that on the first day of each month. What's happening. So all the market research that you see is published in the papers around who's using the trail, where they're from, how much they're spending. That all comes from a professional company that does it in Wellington. So we get an awful lot of data on the trail, which has been really helpful. So just want you to know that that's happening ongoing, and a lot of our operators out on the trail actually feed in the survey names to me to invite people to do those surveys. So that's pretty constant happening. And the other relationships obviously are things with the councils and with Trustpower, with you, Tim, and with Doc across this different aspects of it. Involved in the strategic planning work around the trail and reporting, and obviously feeding in quite a lot on any sort of trail upgrade work that needs to happen. And we put funding applications in for different trail enhancements. Right now, we have directional signage going in, working with the Grey District Council, so there's additional directional signage that's about to go in there. Again, this is something that's been highlighted through the survey feedback that we've had, and we also have got a number 8 additional interpretation panels going into the Grey District side of it. We put a lot in Westland last year. We're now doing Grey District. We also have another one going out into Milltown. It should be in by next Friday. So obviously put up of those, so they are businesses that are connected with the trail, and we're regularly communicating and working with them. They're backing some of our marketing work as well too, so pretty positive members that we've got. With COVID, I don't think there's any that we've directly lost from COVID, and we've certainly picked up a couple, so that's very positive. We are also working with the companies that are bringing people in. We have a voluntary activity fee that they pay to us. It's totally voluntary, so they can choose. But we had most of them pre-COVID signed into doing that with us, and that taps a lot of the people that are in tour groups come, how we get more of the independent riders contributing back to the trail. About a week and a half ago, and that's already linked in and about to start in a campaign being done with Tourism West Coast. We've also just put up on the site advice for people around the health and safety and issues out on the trail. We do there are 4 annual events that are held out on the trail, so they are done on those happening. We prepare the economic assessment of the trail, and that seems to be used continually. I've even had emails wanting to know information about that today from Wellington. And we've also inputted into the regional cycle trail has been with that. So that's something that Jeff or Rossiter or myself put our heads together over, and when we looked at what had come back through from Becca and put our own feelings about that together into a strategy. So I've really just only touched on a few things what we do that are probably what I'd call more of the key things. There's an awful lot of communications that happen as trail manager all the time. So, yeah.
Thanks, Jackie. Are there any questions?
Just through the chair, Jackie, in terms of economic assessment, it's been quite a while since the last one was done. We're coming into a long-term plan, and there's a lot of, I suppose, aspirations in terms of the funding applications we're about to launch into regarding trails. But I'm thinking, what is your assessment of the ability to have one done this side of Christmas to obviously support long-term plan strategies?
This side of 2 months, you should have it.
Oh, fantastic.
The other thing I just make a comment with too is that we look at the cycle trail in a year that really starts on the 1st of July. And we're looking at lining our accounts with that as well too. Jeff and I were talking about that last week. But obviously being seasonal, it means you can then sort of look at a season rather than sort of cutting something off in March. So I have historically waited till the end of June to get what the year has been. So with the information we're looking at, we how many, for example, we benchmark against how many more bikes are for hire with our companies, how many hire companies have we got, all those sort of things. So we use that as the cut-off date for it. I was going to do it when we went into lockdown. I thought there'd be no more use of the trail that was significant in terms of visitors coming in, but I held that over. So.
Do you see the 2 months of lockdown? It would have had an impact, but you could probably filter those out in terms of non-productive months.
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily, the part of the economic assessment report that would impact on would be the trail counter statistics. Yeah. It may impact on bike hire, but it would largely be that component rather than, because we're really with the economic assessment looking at the visitors coming in. So what are the tour companies, what's the growth been with the tour companies coming in? So, yeah.
Any further questions? Thank you, Jackie. Someone like to move that we received the West Coast of Organisation update.
Before we do that, could I perhaps ask through the chair if I could add the two components that I was going to report on? So just very quickly, and again, if I could just make the comment back through you as the chair. Cycle Journeys and Waitaki District Council had had partnered with Lincoln University to do a economic survey on one particular section of the trail, which we could identify really well. And my hope was that we would be able to generate information that would be applicable and be able to calibrate against the information we're getting from the surveys, because it would have been nice to just be able to line up those bits of information. Unfortunately, the survey started in early March, and they managed to get 1 week of surveys on the trail before going into lockdown. So we're in the process now of looking to see what we can do to validate some of that information. But at this stage, on the Alps to Ocean, we will need to perhaps re-trigger the surveys, which is why it will be great to have Jackie rerun the economic survey results. But I'd just like to move on to the two areas that I really wanted to cover off, which was the standing of the trail within the network. So as one of the sides to my interest is that I'm elected as a board member on the New Zealand Cycle Trail, which acts between MB and the trail owners. So we meet on a regular basis and we deal with the New Zealand-wide implications of some of the components of work that's been done. One of the things that the NZCT board is responsible to MB for is to conduct an annual warrant of fitness, trail warrant of fitness, which involves somebody riding on it. The Wilderness Trails scored on this last one, which was held in, I think, June last year, was 4.3 out of 5, which puts it into the top end of the cycle trails around the country. So I think from my memory, there are 6 trails which score 4 and above, and I think we probably sit about number 3 or 4. So we're scoring extremely well there. Our clients, our customers, our riders score it on a net promoter score of between 91 and 94. It's an exceptional score that we should take real pride in. And these are coming through on a monthly survey. Yes.
Could you just repeat those numbers, Jeff? You're
Certainly.
coming through a little bit blurry.
Yes, I appreciate it. I apologise for not being there in the physical presence. The warrant of fitness is scored on a 1 to 5 basis, and the last warrant of fitness for the trail was 4.3, which puts it in the top 6 trails within the 22 trail network. Okay? The customers also are surveyed.
Jackie, do you have those figures?
Yeah, so what's being said is that...
Jeff, you're not coming through very clear at all, and
okay,
we're finding it difficult to understand. So what we might do is Jackie can just, she's got the figures there.
Yep, agreed.
Thank you.
Okay.
So what Jeff is saying is the warrant of fitness that's carried out nationally by New Zealand Cycle Trails, so they actually bring an independent person in. Our score by memory was 4.4. So from the whole of the 22 great rides, we're sitting right up there with the best trails in terms of the warrant of fitness. And it is New Zealand Cycle Trails looks at doing that annually, and we get a whole report on the trail and what can be improved on to help build a plan, which needs I've never seen this play out.
Can you hear us, Jeff?
No, unfortunately, I have. I'm not. It's freezing up quite a bit, and I think I should leave Jackie to continue the presentation on my behalf as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so I wasn't sure of all Jeff's points on what he was going to say, but he was talking about the client feedback that we get, so that comes through on our surveys every month and is fairly, is pretty good feedback. There's not too many things that we get issues with. We're addressing some of those, like things like directional signage on the trail. To Aotearoa, I'm not sure what Jeff was going to say about that, but I do believe that we have scored at the top of that a couple of times already. And my understanding is the trail position in the, he was going to talk about the Northern Westland Cycle Trail Network. I can jump to that now if you'd like. You've got, I passed around a presentation. Right, it came out, didn't it?
This one here.
Yeah.
On the email.
Yes. So people have got that in front of them. This was part of the cycle trail strategy that we prepared. Can I just have a copy of it? And I was going to talk about this at the tail end, but Jeff's got it there. So pretty much the strategy that we've got and the positioning, if you look at, I think it's been picked up already that the cycle trails are the equivalent with the other icons that Tourism West Coast has got, and we're saying it's like the seventh pillar from the six icons. Let's add another one. And I think Jeff was referring to the map that we've got there, which really sets out what the five hero multi-day rides were. So it's getting a picture of what the key multi-day rides. There are lots of rides all over the West Coast and all very good ones that we put into the strategy. And we put, Phil Rossiter wanted to put the Heathy in as well too. The Reefton trails have not necessarily been recognised as much in terms of what could be done up there, what needs to be done with that, but we've put that on the list because there's some excellent cycling in that whole Reefton network. Old Ghost Road, Kawateri, the new trail, Paparoa, and the Wilderness Trail. So that's the offering, that's an outstanding international offering that the West Coast has got for the cycle trails. I'll just touch on the next page of that. So this was looking at what a regional model was. So we were looking at the two existing cycle trails ourselves in the Old Ghost Road, and the discussion was around what a regional strategy could look like. So we've looked at the key trails, and even though we operate ourselves independently, it was like, where are the areas that we could be sharing and doing much better collectively? So looking at the possibility of working together on a regional network that meets regularly, and then looking at the next page with the strategy actions. It was really about we need to protect what we've got, we need to strengthen it, and we need to grow the businesses within it. So that's the wider strategy that we were looking at. We don't need a whole lot of trade. Working with what we've got, looking at goals around advocacy at the trail market, and should we be putting up a wider picture of trails in addition to our own trails, and also looking at how we generate more revenue from riders on the trail, and advocating from a funding perspective as well too. So I think that was Jeff's points around looking at the New Zealand position from a national and local cycle trail. The points he wanted to make around where there needed to be improvements in the trail, and I think these are well known by those of us sitting around the table, things like the Canary route, the high water route, and his comments around the fact that this can give us the limitations that we have on the infrastructure, could actually lead to some reputational risk with the trail, with weather events that impacts on the trail. People thinking, well, if it's going to be closed, will I come here? So there's a concern around the reputational risk. The next part of the presentation we were going to give was myself talking about the Mahanapua Loop. So we've been working with the Department of Conservation and looking at that Mahanapua Loop, putting that in with council. I've got a document that has been prepared looking at the concept. There are around 5 businesses and about 15 experiences in that Mahanapua Loop, and really trying to elevate that as an important piece of infrastructure that could be added to the trail. Final points are looking at the bigger picture and the future for growth on the trail. At the moment, I see there are at least 4 drivers to growth. So if we say, what's the trail looking like going forward? This coming season, we're already seeing elevated growth from previous years, and we believe that will continue. There will also be growth, we believe, from the domestic campaigns that are happening with getting New Zealanders to get out and about and see the country. So that will be additional to what we believe we would have had. We also have the international market that can't travel internationally. So some of those riders are very likely to come our way. And we're also looking at the new cyclists. In lockdown, there were a large number of people that took to bikes, and bike sales were really high. Because our trail is grade 2 easy, we expect we might get that impact on our trail. And the interim between that, because our 60s market, so they can come at any time. So we're expecting to see significant growth on the trail. We're here the trail with riders is about $1,000 a rider per person, probably about $250 a day at the moment with it. The trail is bringing in direct income of about between 8 and 10 million a year, or an economic return about $30 million if we add the 3.55 multiplier effect that MB used. So pretty much the trail is bringing in 3 times the capital cost of what it was built with. So that's just a key point of that. It's probably well known within the room. So thank you.
Any questions?
Just a question in regards to domestic tourism. Tourism looks close.
Just our campaign is going to air within the next week. I've just approved the ads that have been prepared, and we had just done a complete new video and photography for that. And what we're looking at doing is targeting the family market with that, so it's leading up to the next holidays. So we've already got a lot of material that we've promoted in the past for the generic market, and we're now introducing the family market, and we're looking at doing a winter shoot to target that as well too, to promote more for the winter market. So yes.
Question, Jackie, on the OPEX, the $80,000, whereabouts does that come from?
It came from the Western District Council's estimate in your annual plan. And I'll also make the comment that that was sort of done brief.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, this time, can we move that we accept the report from Jackie and also from Jeff? We have a mover.
I'm happy to move that.
Thank you. Peter?
Chair, thank you.
And a second. Thank you. All those in favour? Say aye. Contrary? Carried. Okay, the next report, presentation is the project and grant assets. activity management plan presented by David Elwood.
Thank you,
David.
Thank you. Welcome all. So I've put together a rapid fire PowerPoint presentation. So there are 16 slides, of which quite a number of these have already been discussed in detail by Jeff and Jackie, but I was unsure as to what we were going to be discussing. So as per the first slide, basically breaking it down into a number of different activities. So page 2, the subcommittee. So what you have in your, what you've just endorsed as such, I've just thrown together a few statements here as the ex-project manager for the cycle trail, the way that I see the business case fits in with it. So in the top, we have the MB NZCT input, which the Trail Trust and Council share collectively, and I think it's probably appropriate to say that so Grey District Council and Western District Council both own a portion of the trail, but with the agreement with the government, Western District Council is the nominated party to carry on the communications. I think that's something that should be stated so that people understand, because I don't think it's clear to some parties that Western District Council is seen to be the trail owner. However, it is owned by both parties and the maintenance costs are co-shared. Yeah, thank you. The next one, so today we've just talked about the committee, subcommittee, the Trail Trust, Trail Manager. Heritage New Zealand shouldn't really be there, but it's a statement. If you look at the bottom right in there, Heritage New Zealand and archaeologists, there's a lot of project work that has other parties such as them involved, and we'll get into that in a bit more detail. So on the right-hand column, we've got the project managers, so looking to formalise some processes. So historically, the trail has not had dedicated personnel associated with it, and so that's part of the discussion with this committee looking to the future. There are various contractors. We have key inputs from landowners and affected parties. So once again, when it looks at enhancements, it's critical that the discussions and inputs from those is well understood early, and the deliverables are done in a timely manner and on cost. Volunteers have played a role in more recent years with trail construction, and indeed, might add, it was pleasing. I found some photos of Tony Cole helping build the Hinapua cycle trail from a couple of years ago. It was interesting to look back at where we've come from. And then recently we've had a structural engineer, well, we've had a student engineer carry out some structural calculations for council combined with the Department of Conservation structural engineers. So we're trying to get some projects underway now, get things started to have them set aside. So on a rainy day, shovel-ready projects, we've got something to present immediately. So that's just my take on that structure and how that would flow. So item 3 was like, where is the trail? What is the trail? These are the 2 snapshots of, hey, this is the West Coast. We are a grade 2, grade 3, so we're 70% grade 2 and 30% grade 3. So that compares very well with the number 1 trail for the North Island. That's about 64-36, so grade 2, grade 3. So I'm going to say out loud, the 2 most desirable trails, so to speak, have very similar characteristics in that context. Just a map of the trail. The wilderness is in the central part, that's for sure. Moving to slide 4, I've just taken some snapshots out of some of the other literature, and it's like trail must-haves, more is better, the wow factors. The things that we need to look at is improving and maintaining these. And I think I'm pleased to say that I think we hit the 90 percentile for the majority of those items that I have put there. Talking on Jackie's research there, the rider profile, the gender and the age, it's really interesting with our profiles. I think we do have some of the oldest riders of all trails in New Zealand, and they love it because of the trail surface, etc. Down at the bottom line, choosing the wilderness. Once again, Jackie's research, which comes out in her reports, it's good to get this sort of data. And then off-trail must-haves, more is better, and the wow factors. This is where we're looking at continuous improvement right now for these activities to try and keep the trail moving in a positive manner. So that was just a quick subset. There were comments there before about some of the impacts on the trail. Our biggest one by far are weather events. The last year we spent in excess of $160,000. When you say we spent, that was the cost of the recovery from an event 1 year ago. That was 100% subsidised by the government though, which is why it is good to be part of the Ngāharenga New Zealand Great Rides, because we do get that subsidy and it's 100% in this type of incident. Just another comment on that. It's interesting, we actually had a trail shelter stolen from the most remote part of the trail, ridiculous as it might sound. With that would have been 100% fully subsidised in any case by the government, but we actually had a trail ferry came along and built one on behalf with full sponsorship at no cost to the other party. So some good things do happen out there. There's some bad things, there are plenty of good things as well, and it's good that we can fall back to MB in that area. Touching briefly on slide 6, and it might be an opportune time, if it's all right, for the Chief Executive to make some comment, because I don't know what detail we are here today.
So part of today is to actually set some scene, I suppose. We're quite keen to talk around starting to look at prioritising future projects rather than discuss them in detail today. All I want to say today is that we do have our irons in the fire in terms of shovel-ready projects. We've nominated parts of future capital expenditure as potentially government granting us to proceed with these projects. Current value of those projects is at 3.5 million. So that's, we put an initial package of just over 14 million, and following advice in the last few days, it's been obviously cut down severely down to only a $3.5 million application. We're hopeful that at least part of that, if not all of it, will be successful. There's a mixture of safety improvements, i.e. getting structures up to the right standard, and also getting riders off the roads. And the other part of that is about economic and future enhancements. And we've got a part of that is Mahinapur is one of those projects we see as quite critical for the economic development of the region as well. So we have an application in now at 3.5, but what I want to do is use this committee to actually redefine what that priority is for the future. And then obviously we have that potentially as a public workshop post that as well. So quite keen to make it a totally inclusive process. We have the current asset management plan, which Dave will go through in a minute, predefining what they are as an asset management plan right now. We need that for the long-term plan anyway, but there is an opportunity to be rearranged based on the feedback from committee members and the public in general. Obviously, that asset management plan will go into a long-term plan, which will then go out for full consultation anyway, and we'll have the public feedback. But I just want to endorse all the work that David has done in getting us to this position. Unfortunately, David may be leaving us soon, so he set us up really well for the future. And we do have details of what each of these projects is all about. So thank you, David. I'll let you proceed.
Thank you. So moving on to the next slide, purely coincidental, slide 7 with 3 lovely pictures. Trust Power and Department of Conservation inputs required for both of these here. Once again, it's just to show the types of projects that we have scheduled. Moving on to the next slide 8, I have developed quite a number of priority project identification forms, and tried to set the picture as to what we're doing and why, and what indicative costs are. I think it's important to note that when people quite often used to phone me and say, how much is it per kilometre to build a trail? You can build a section of trail for 50,000, you can build a section of trail that's per kilometre, or we could get up to 140, 150 or higher in some of our areas. And we've had some of those challenging constructions as well. So there is no black and white, this is how much it costs to build a trail. Each section has to be looked at with its own inherent risks and construction challenges. So that's just an example of the type of form that when you start talking about the detail of projects, this sort of information will be available for review.
Just one comment in there. What we have endeavoured to do, because it is such quite a significant time resource, we've actually included project management costs in all our applications, so we can actually contract someone to lead this on our behalf rather than staff spending a lot of time on this, unless we can backfill a staff member. So there's costs include coverage to perform this work going forward.
I think their time can be capitalised as well. So that was slide 8, shows the Canary water race structures, the fact that there's a number that are underwood. Once again, this is a trust power and Department of Conservation because it's owned by the Department of Conservation, but with co-share for trust power for water. So there's some good relationships that we need to keep working collectively there. The next one, and I thought it probably is opportune just to have a look at one project in a little more detail. So while it's called Mahinapur Lake Loop, it does not need to be a loop. And since that original plan was presented there, we've actually gone through to the next stage. And while it's represented there at 1.87, we have actually hit much higher costs total than what we've got shown here. So the next slide, 10, actually shows the fact that I broke Lake Mahinapur down, thanks to the Department of Conservation recent input, to 9 options. I could have kept going. I actually have more. And indeed, I think the preferred solution right now is none of these, but it's very close. So once again, we've looked at this with at a desktop level to consider all issues and options and inputs as well. So that's available. And so if you look at the next slide 11, there goes issues and options 4 versus 7A. So 4, once again, Woodstock Ringwood Road, we could end up with a small loop and then some larger loops. There could be connectivity to Picnic Point. Personally, I'm not in favour of it. I think it should be a walkway. It's very challenging and a lot of money for not what I would call a lot of gain. So that's what we have to look at, though. You have to investigate. Whereas option 7A would provide an entire link and loop right around the lake, not necessarily on those exact alignments. It might be a slight variation involved in that, but that's just to show the type of consideration that's needed. So the next slide 12, just an example of, this is actually the most recent trail opening, 1.2 kilometre. This was actually the first funding that we received from the government after our trail completion. So this was the first time we could actually get a co-share of 50% to build a trail section. The reason those 2 images are there is there were 2 historic structures that we had to protect. So this required a Heritage New Zealand authority to undertake. And so we have basically not affected or impacted those heritage items at all. Slide 13, trail count data and survey forms. So this is just the type of information that is available straight off our trail counters. It's a very powerful tool, and indeed I believe the government are looking at that for our trail and others right now because they have live access to all of this. So we can just go online and pick this data at any time. The bottom graph there actually includes some of the COVID period. And you can see that the trail was exceptionally well used. The numbers were just phenomenal at more than 400 people in the grey section some days. And Hokitika Canary Tramway, the highest at 200 to 300 as a normal, and so that's based on population, that's about right. even some of the lesser, so I'll call those the urban. So I think with what we had was 6 counters, we now have 7. So 2 we'll put in that total urban commuter status, and so those are the sort of 2 that we just talked about. We've got 2 that are in the middle, and then we've got 2 that we were calling the wilderness experience. We have a true wilderness counter now, and I believe the data was downloaded yesterday, so I've not seen that, but that fits in with Jackie's questionnaires when she goes out to interrogate riders and say, how's your life and how old are you and how many days and how many dollars. We can actually put a direct comparative with the trail number of users that day and get some true statistics back out of it. So it's pleasing that we have that 7th counter, which will be the true wilderness counter. Once again, moving on to the next slide, slide 14. This is actually what the Trail Trust is all about. It's working with MB for these strategic focuses. And Jackie, I believe you have actually created your own Trail Trust edition version of these. So this sets the criteria about what the focus is from the government, and Jeff and Jackie have developed, in conjunction with the Trail Trust, their own edition of this. And we have some very strong targets because we're doing so well in so many activity areas. So that's just a quick summary of what the Trail Trust works off as well. The next one, basically, just you have to throw a cartoon because some of the documents we get for here, this sort of work for the activity management plan are a bit dry at times. And I think it's time to segue into the activity management plan now, and just hearing some of the discussion from the others previously. So the talk about customer satisfaction survey, net promoter scores and all that. So all of that is actually included in the activity management plan. So section 5.5 talks about customer satisfaction and the net promoter score. So there's brief statements on all of those types of activity. Table 10 has the Trail Trust targets. So the Trail has set its own targets, which are actually higher than what the government standards targets are. And the same in 6.2.2, and 11.1 is the risk types. And some things that Jackie said about risk there. So under 11.1 in the activity management plan, we've got a risk management philosophy approach, and with that we identify the types of risks as being strategic, financial, health and safety, service delivery to the community, organisational capability and capacity, reputational, that's the one that Jackie just touched on before, and then we have the legal and regulatory compliance. So leading into the activity management plan, that is actually a requirement to be supposed to be submitted by the last day of this month to MB. I think there might be a bit of a relaxation on that, but we're in a good place now because I think documents on the order of 67 pages long here. It's yet to be reviewed by others, but it is relatively comprehensive. And just to talk about the level of information and the way that this is formatted, we've actually, in fact today, just had our peer review response for our water activity management plan. And so the discussions that we had for the water activity management plan, I'll be making some minor modifications in this document as well. And so this will be ready for release very soon. Yeah.
So I just want to, this is the first activity management plan for cycleways in New Zealand. So David's sort of pioneering what the AMP would look like. So we're quite proud that David's developed this and for this cycleway, and obviously it'll get critiqued by others, but I think we've made a significant way forward in terms of how we manage this. We'll obviously share it with Ray as well, so they can actually have it in their coffers as well. But I just want to once again thank David for knocking this out. Gave him a big challenge and he's managed to achieve it. There's also some financial operational costs that need to be put inside this in terms of longevity of the project. But we're in a good space. And this is where I suppose the workshop will help define what those future costs will be, or future projects need to be definitive inside this. It is, if we want to be ambitious, that number could be quite big, but we obviously need to balance out the affordability of the trail and investments. we are hopeful government will come forward with this latest round of shovel-ready and kickstart what our ambitions are. But we have to be realistic in terms of the capability of the council to be forward investment in further cycle trails, even though the numbers stack up in terms of economic benefits, there will be a diminishing returns on that to a certain degree. So thank you, David, for getting that together. It is in draft form. Once we have finalised it, we'll share it to the committee for review as well.
So just to make a comment about asset/activity management plans, other trails in New Zealand have documented them in an AMP, but it's either in their transportation AMP, and usually it's been one paragraph, or their reserves. And in fact, in some organisations, i.e. another council, they were in both because they had their ownership and accountabilities within the organisation, a council. Oh, that's through a reserve area, that's through a transportation area, and so it's been split and divided. So I think it's important that it's kept in one area as one statement, and so it's interesting that those other trails, I believe, will be reformatting their entire structure because they have actually taken the accountability, responsibility sometimes out of the reserves department and then put it directly into the transportation because it is actually a transportation activity. And I think it should be understood that it's got every activity associated with it. It's got culverts, it's got a trail surface, just like a gravel road. It's got all of that type of activity that fits into the transportation mode. And indeed, most of the MB paperwork, things like the business cases and things, the background of those all comes from NZTA. So every piece of paper that we get is actually transportation related. So that includes investment logic maps. So I've actually created 6 of those. So I'm sure Mel and Gray will be pleased to hear that I've started to use the ILMs. They're in basic form and do need more work, but there's a lot of work in those areas. And so, but to get your business case, to get your funding, you need all of this information, and you need them for the backbone for the business case, because some of the projects that we've got, the key ones, are the bigger dollar values, the i.e. $1 or more million. And I think it's important to understand that funding component, the threshold for MB is 600K, so that's 300K for council. That's the threshold, bang, that's what you can do. For NZTA, for the transportation, for low cost, low risk, that's 1 million. And so our projects, some of them are much greater than that, so we fall into this really challenging area and need good business case and background information.
Thank you, David. It's very thorough report there. Any questions from anyone?
Through you, Mr. Chair. David, what happens with, for instance, Shantytown, which has always seemed to be logical for a cycleway trail to go to? Is that something that we discuss here, or is that something that's outside of this, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, in addition to all this paperwork I've got here, we have the standard form for MB, and it basically is called their project priority form. And with that, we put it in every project. So included in that, I actually do have Shantytown as a project that is still there. It was discussed in the 2016 meeting with MB at this table, and it has failed to get any momentum, but that is a Grey District Council matter as well. It's in their area, but it is actually still listed. I've not removed it as a project. I presented that as one of the projects in 2016.
Just through the chair, just to respond to the two. This is what I'm proposing that the workshop will flesh out. So in terms of our priority projects, it would still sit inside our land, but obviously not be paid for out of our pocket. But there's definitely funding available if it's supported by a business case. So it's still on the radar as part of future projects.
And so they're actually called phases, so not right. So phase 1 we have completed. So we've said phase 1 is passed, and so I've got a summary sheet for the AMP and the appendices saying we achieved all of these things. They were phase 1. So we've got phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 and phase 5 that I have completed to about the 90 percentile, and that would be part of your workshop.
Just a comment, thank you through the chair. I was one of the original Western Wilderness Trust members from the initial formation when it was there, and it was early days. And I can see that since then, in the opening and what the good work that Dave's done, I can see the trail is in really good hands here, you know. And I'd like to thank Dave and especially Jackie and Jeff, you know, for the input putting into it. And it is a great asset. One of the major concerns I had on the initial one was funding, how we would ever get it self-supporting. And that's always been, I can see, a challenge, and a challenge still going forward to get it, you know, to get the riders, the users, as you mentioned earlier, to actually contribute. And the second one that I was always concerned about was easements and access arrangements, you know, to make sure that the trail was covered along the way. So I don't know what that situation is at the moment. You know, I know users like Trust Power and there's Department of Conservation and various. So I would hope that somewhere along the way that's all been put in order too. You know, that was one of the major concerns I had all along there, that we were covered in the trail. So I don't know whether comment on that or.
There is actually a template document that we had prepared about 3 years ago. It's not fully complete, and there are some outstanding agreements still to be completed. But I would say, off the top of my head, but 85 to 90% sorted. There is still 10 to 15% that's outstanding.
And if I can comment through the chair as well, just so we've got an MOU with council that's due to expire next year. It's 10 years old now, so we're just in the process of updating that with new maps and sort of, I guess, future-proofing it as well, just so. And at a meeting or the workshop at some point, quite keen just to talk to all of you about sort of what the process is from the dock side of things, sort of how we can help and support the trail and what the deal breakers are for us and where we can add value, that kind of thing.
So it's just on your first point, we have been successful in the last few weeks in getting funding for trail managers. So it's been identified through MB that funding trail managers to support Trails Around New Zealand has put onus back on the ratepayer right now. So we put an application in for 45,000. That 45,000 has been accepted, and it's also been accepted for the next 3 years. So all in all, we've got $135,000, which will be passing on to the trail manager, or to the trust to subsidise the ongoing costs. So that's been really thankful, acknowledging that this is an ongoing burden for trailers. Sometimes it will be a tipping point in terms of keeping one on or not.
Through the chair, if I could just have one more, just to answer your worship's question about Shantytown, which is also, you know, a tourist icon on the West Coast and to be promoted. The Grey District had looked at various options of putting a ride out there through legal roads, and there was even a sort of steam train mooted to go right out to the Parai by the lay-by, where the little signage is, where the Rotary lines put up to south of Parai. And that source work in progress, but there's just a few landowner issues in the centre there, that private land, which is west. So the council did, I know we'll workshop this, but the council did actually, through safety improvements, put along the Shantytown Road, Rutherglen Road, actually put a 2 metre cycleway all the way out. So there is that option there as a temporary issue. So people can actually, if it was promoted, to actually cycle all the way to Shantytown. There is a proper cycleway on the side verge of the road, but the ultimate end of experience would be to have it go through road reserve, off the main road, and private land, you know, to get there. That's experience. So thank you for the question.
Can I ask a question? Yes. So I think funding is quite a critical point of discussion, and maybe Jeff also is on the NZCT board. So one of the major issue is that we cannot directly charge riders for the benefit of the trail, and it is difficult to do that at the best of times in any case. But Jeff, is it likely that the government would change the status with that condition that the trail owner cannot charge?
Through the chair, I don't think there's a chance in hell of that ever happening.
Oh. That's not very good.
I'm sorry about that, but I mean, some of the trails, a lot of the trail land that is being used by trails throughout the network sits on the Department of Conservation land, and there's very strong laws around rights of access and unvetted access and non-payment. So I think if you were ever focusing on that, you'd go down a deep rabbit hole.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, Dave, for the report. So, someone move that we receive the projects and draft asset management plan presented from David. Good on you, Nicole. And a seconder for that.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Peter. So all those in favour?
Aye.
Contrary? Carried.
Next, through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Is it an appropriate time to convey from this committee our thanks to David and to Jackie and to Jeff, because this has gone from nothing 3 years ago to a major economic stimulus for our districts, both Grey and Westland, and we need to recognise also the input of Department of Conservation and Trustpower. I think I just feel we should do it formally, because without those components, this thing would still be floating around, and it's fantastic. I know, look out there now, the cyclists coming in now.
It's a good point, Your Worship, and I just feel that the relationship building has been outstanding. So great partnerships, good stuff.
Well, I support the comments of Your Worship there too. It's come a long way, and there's a lot of people to be thankful for on the way, especially those stakeholders there too, and the guys that have put the effort in. It's a fabulous project, and it can only grow to better things.
The next item, 6, which is
Speaking of partnerships, we took the opportunity with the subcommittee to, I suppose, recalibrate the partnership between Grey District Council, Westland District Council, and the West Coast Wilderness Trust. We have made this document was drafted and approved, I think it was back in 2006, not April 2017. But with the changes and where we are now, there was a couple of changes we were recommending. Without going through those in detail, so there's only 4 changes to the current MOU. One is for the trustees to, this is the Wilderness trustees, to take the best endeavours to create income, to manage the trail and enable long-term sustainability and minimise OPEX. So this is the onus on the Wilderness Trail to follow up on the sponsorship, find partners and look at the ways to reduce, to increase income. The second part was to acknowledge it, and this is what David Inwood's alluded to earlier on, is that we acknowledge that the current future MB OPEX Trail Fund Manager grants be passed on to the Trust to subsidise their work. The Grey District Council and Western District Council will endeavour to include the Wilderness Trail Trust in their long-term plans, consider ongoing viability of the Trust, and then also the parties acknowledge that the Western District Council is a holder of the membership and voting right for the West Coast Wilderness Trust
and on the NZCT, that's a missing piece. So we'll open up for questions.
Okay, we have no questions on that. Someone like to move that that the Trail Subcommittee adopt the amended memorandum of understanding with the following amendments. Mr. Worship, Mr. Smith, and a second. Nicole. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye. We'll get that around the signatures.
Carried.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Can I take it from that previous discussion that Councillor Haddock and myself can write a letter of thanks to the individuals involved? Perhaps Peter could get Great District Mayor to sign it as well. So a full recognition of the contribution. Is that what you're quite comfortable with that?
Yes, I think it's proper procedure.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a safety update by
Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry, just want to just take the lecture.
Yeah.
The Karaka Bridge widening has been completed by Trustpower, and that is obviously a great improvement for us. That has now actually created another issue for us with quad bikes and motorbikes going across the bridge because it's nice and wide for them to access. So we're currently working with Destination Westland to get at least a bollard up there, and we're considering that to be hopefully efficient to keep them out. In addition to that, we've been advised that NZTA will now continue with the widening of the cycle bridge of the Kitiga River. So that's going ahead. We have also had the incident up at the weirs, and some reports have been done. We've had to look at what corrective actions can be taken up at the weirs to at least apply some control there in adverse weather conditions. So the decision is taken to lock the gates up there to be administered by Destination Westland. In addition to that, we'll also be working with RCG to see if we can get the extension of the Wi-Fi network up there so we can install some telemetry and get some early warnings. I think the challenge for us is that the weather up there is often very different to what we experience down here in the Kitiga. And it would be great if we have some telemetry to give us early warnings of the weir levels and any rain events up there. So and that's a long-term view that hopefully RCG will help us with that process. Then we've completed the work on the zigzags and also the Kursway Cowboys. We've also installed some additional safety measures on that section of the trail with additional barriers being installed. And also we've upgraded the culverts at the wash out at Cowboys. Yeah.
Comment regarding the barriers at the Kawaka Bridge. I've actually been communicating with the hand cycle group, so when we're looking at that, hopefully I can come back with some solutions that don't inhibit hand cycles.
All right.
Thanks, Louis, could you consult with us before those barriers go in, because we have to have certain accesses for vehicles right up to the end of that bridge, just so we can operate our gates. And also I think that some signage on those bridges, really no motorbikes, no quad bikes would be good too.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, Louis. Would someone like to move that the verbal safety update from Louis be received?
Oh, happy to move that.
And second, favour? Aye. Contrary? Carried. There is one other item here. Sorry. Yeah. So it's just a third, so that's the maintenance update, which Destination Western is unable to come to the meeting. So I'd like to move that the maintenance report be referred. Someone can move that. Bruce, and seconded by Nicole. The next meeting, I found date for the next meeting.
Through the chair, we haven't set another meeting, but it's for the committee to decide and meet must through the chair.
Yeah, through the chair, I think the next stage is to actually have a workshop. This particularly, we'll still have some was data available to actually workshop priority projects that we have on our asset management plan. So we'll work with the chair on the date for that workshop. Hopefully we can make it a little near future. And then I suggest that the next meeting be in August, make sure we're keeping momentum. There's a week available where there's no committee meetings, so we'll contact you, Chair, to fill in that slot. Okay. So the next meeting will be.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to thank everyone for our first meeting on. Peter?
Sorry, Paul, yes, Chair, just just make a note on the meeting dates, the Grey District Council meetings on the second Monday of every, you probably know, Diane, every month, and the tenders is every second Thursday at 4 o'clock. So there is a sort of set, so if, perhaps communicate or through Debbie, they'll sort of, so they don't clash it. So thank you.
Okay. Just a query, does this time suit everyone? In terms of late afternoons, 3 to 5?
Yep.
Thank you. No other matters. I close the meeting at 4:25. And just to make sure that